The first time the hum came, it wasn't loud. At first, it was just a faint thrum in the background, like the buzz of a distant lawnmower, so far away it could be ignored. But in a city like this, you learn to notice the small sounds, the ones that didn't belong. That hum was different. It seemed to crawl inside you, vibrating in places you didn't know existed. Something was wrong, and I knew it. I sat on my couch in the cramped apartment I had called home for the last few months, the glow of my television reflecting off the dark walls. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening. Nothing special. Just another night of empty hours to kill. Like always, I had my phone in hand, my eyes scrolling through the endless stream of posts and videos, the noise of the world buzzing around me. I wasn't like everyone else in this city. People who lived their lives in a frenzy of noise and light. I wasn't looking for excitement. I didn't want fame or friends. I didn't want any of it. I preferred the quiet, the solitude. A low-key existence was all I needed. My name is Seth, and that's all you really need to know about me. I've never been the one to go out and stir the pot. I didn't speak much. My job at the tech support call center paid the bills, and that's all I needed to survive. I didn't want friends, didn't need family. They were all just distractions anyway. I had no interest in the drama people craved. The world could burn around me, and I would be just fine, locked away in my own little corner. No one could touch me, or at least I thought no one could. As the hum grew louder, I felt it rattling in my bones, a low tremor that tickled the inside of my skull. It wasn't natural. It was wrong. Something was coming, but I couldn't figure out what. At first, I assumed it was just the usual faulty connection with the city's electricity grid. It happened sometimes, flickers in the power, odd static noises in the air, but the hum was getting stronger, creeping up in pitch like a heartbeat in a tense room. Then, in an instant, everything went dark. The hum exploded into silence, and every screen in the apartment blinked off at the same time. TV, phone, computer, everything. A second later, they flickered back to life. But this time it was different. This time, the message was on every device. Emergency alert. Hide immediately. This is not a drill. The words burned into my mind, a cold and unnatural chill running down my spine. It was the kind of message you never wanted to see, the kind of message you didn't want to believe. And yet there it was, clear, unrelenting. 5 seconds. That's all it lasted. Then, just as abruptly as it had appeared, it was gone, leaving nothing but confusion in its wake. I stared at my phone, hoping that it had just been some sick joke, some glitch in the system. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. My stomach twisted, and a cold sweat began to bead on my forehead. I stood up from the couch and paced the small apartment. I wasn't scared. No, that wasn't it. I had learned long ago not to get caught up in fear. Fear was for the weak, for people who didn't understand how to keep their cool when everything was falling apart. But this was different. A sense of urgency gnawed at me. I had to do something. What though? What could I possibly do? I opened my front door just a crack and peered into the hallway. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into nothing. It was empty, like it always was at this time of night. No sounds from the neighbors, no TV blaring from down the hall. The world felt off-kilter, like something had shifted just slightly, enough for me to feel it. I could hear the hum again. It was louder now, pressing against the walls of the building, vibrating beneath my feet. But there was no escaping it. It wasn't coming from outside, it was inside every device, inside the air itself. I closed the door, locking it behind me as the weight of the message settled in. Hide. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. I wasn't stupid. I knew something was wrong. The world had just gone into panic mode, and I had no idea why. No one did. The message was too vague, too cryptic, but that didn't matter. The fact was, it wasn't just me. Everyone had gotten that alert. Everyone was hearing the hum, and the panic was already starting. I checked my phone again. Notifications poured in from social media. People were losing their minds. There were questions, pleas for answers, half-baked theories. Was this a terrorist attack? Is this some kind of government experiment? Is it aliens? I ignored it all. They were just scared, like everyone else. I had my own instincts to trust, my own sense of survival. But survival wasn't just about hiding. It was about understanding what was coming. I thought about going to the window, but something stopped me. An instinct. I could feel it in my gut. The same thing that had made me stop in my tracks when I first heard the hum. It wasn't safe. Whatever was out there wasn't something I could face. The television flickered back to life, a sudden burst of static that made me flinch. I grabbed the remote and turned it on, hoping for some explanation, hoping for someone to explain what was happening. Instead, the screen glitched, showing only static. The familiar news anchor, normally calm and composed, appeared on screen, her face pale and strained. "Do not ask questions. Do not try to understand." Her voice was garbled, warped by interference. "You have to hide, now." Her words sent a wave of cold down my spine. Something about the urgency in her voice made it real. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a glitch. It was happening. And it wasn't going to stop. My instincts kicked in. I moved to the closet, grabbed the emergency kit I had packed months ago, things I never thought I'd actually need. Flashlight, water, some canned food, a first aid kit, a spare battery for my phone, the basics. But it wasn't enough. It wouldn't be enough. I needed to get out. The apartment felt suffocating now, the walls pressing in around me. The hum was everywhere. It was inside my bones, and it was getting worse. I couldn't stay here. Whatever was coming, whatever had triggered that alert, was drawing closer. I grabbed my coat, slung it over my shoulder, and headed for the door again. But as I reached the handle, something made me pause. The hallway. It was silent again, unnaturally so. I could feel it. A presence. An oppressive force that had descended upon the building. And then came the knock. It was faint at first, a tapping on the door, but then it grew more insistent. A rapid, frantic knocking. I didn't move. I couldn't. Whoever or whatever was on the other side, I had no intention of finding out. I stepped back into the apartment, locking the door behind me once more. My breath came in shallow gasps as I sank to my knees. I wasn't just hiding anymore. I was running, and I had no idea where I was going. But the message had been clear: hide. And that's exactly what I was going to do. By midnight, the world had descended into a dark, suffocating quiet. The streets, once buzzing with late-night activity, now sat vacant. No cars honked their horns. No pedestrians hurried down the sidewalks. It was as though every living thing had disappeared, leaving behind nothing but shadows and abandoned vehicles. Even the flickering streetlights, which usually gave the illusion of life, were now weak, their light barely enough to cut through the heavy darkness. Inside homes, the silence was even more pronounced. People huddled in closets, under furniture, in basements, anywhere they could squeeze into a space that felt just a little safer than the rest of their homes. No one dared to leave their sanctuaries. Even the brave souls who had once mocked the panic of others now found themselves questioning the wisdom of their earlier bravado. The message, "Hide immediately," was like a wound in their minds, bleeding dread into the very core of their being. I had no intention of leaving my apartment. I'd locked the door, barricaded the windows with furniture, and covered everything with heavy blankets to keep the outside world from prying in. The hum hadn't stopped. If anything, it had grown louder. It crawled into my ears and burrowed under my skin, a constant presence. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was some glitch in the system, maybe a test from a satellite or a government test gone awry. But it didn't stop. It kept growing, intensifying as though it was alive, feeding off the fear in the air. The hum felt like it was coming from every direction. But it wasn't just an auditory experience. It was tactile, as though the very walls of my apartment were vibrating with the sound, making everything seem as though it was one wrong step away from shattering. Hours passed. My phone remained in my hand, occasionally flashing new notifications, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. What good would it do to see people panicking and theorizing about something they didn't understand? The message had been clear: hide. But what if hiding wasn't enough? I tried to steady my breathing. The weight of the air in my apartment pressed down on me, making it hard to focus. The longer I stayed inside, the more my mind became consumed by a growing sense of unease. The lights flickered once, twice before everything went dark again. I froze, not out of fear, but from something else, something more primal, a sense of inevitability. It wasn't just the power. The hum had ceased. The world went deathly still. It was the kind of silence that presses into your ears, a suffocating quietness that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I looked around. The apartment was still. Nothing moved. No sounds of sirens or cars or voices outside. I wasn't sure if the world outside was still there, or if it had been swallowed up by the same darkness that enveloped me. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, barely audible. A light tapping at my door like a child asking for attention, but then it grew more insistent, rapid, almost frantic. My pulse quickened. I felt that sudden rush of cold adrenaline, the kind that tells you something is terribly wrong. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to ignore it, to stay still, to not make a sound. The knock came again. Louder. I didn't move. It felt as though time was stretching, like I was caught in a moment that was both too long and too short. My hand trembled, but I resisted the urge to reach for the doorknob. The knocking continued. It didn't stop. It was as though the person, or whatever it was on the other side of the door, knew I was in here. And it wanted me to respond. I slowly backed away from the door, every nerve in my body on fire. My mind raced, running through every possible explanation. It could be someone, another survivor maybe, desperate for help, or it could be something else, something far worse. Something that had come for me. A voice, soft and distorted, broke the silence. It was barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the stillness like a knife. "You know what's coming, Seth." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There was no mistake. It knew my name. But how? How could it know my name? I pressed my back against the wall, my eyes darting around the room, seeking any means of escape. But there was none. The windows were covered. The front door was the only way out, but I couldn't go back to it. I couldn't make a sound. I stayed frozen, as though moving would somehow trigger something I wasn't ready to face. The air itself seemed to tighten, drawing me into its web. My breath quickened, and the corners of my vision began to blur. The voice came again, but this time it was colder, more insistent. "You can't hide, Seth. Not from this." Suddenly, the door rattled, as if something on the other side was trying to break through. I stumbled backward, unable to tear my eyes away from the handle, watching it twist in a way that shouldn't have been possible. The hum began again, but this time it was worse. It felt like the ground itself was shaking, vibrating beneath me. Every inch of the room seemed to resonate with the low, insidious sound, and I realized then, it wasn't just a noise, it was a signal. A call, a warning. In that moment, I understood. The hum was alive. Whatever was out there, whatever was waiting, was calling to me. It had always been calling, and now it was finally ready to claim its prize. I moved instinctively, turning to the back of the apartment. The window. I could climb out. I could escape. I wasn't sure where I would go, but I knew I couldn't stay here. But before I could move, I heard something else. A crash, a loud bang from the hallway, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Then the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the scream rising in my throat. My body froze, instinctively wanting to bolt for the window, but I knew it was no use. Whatever was out there, whatever was hunting us, would find me. The world was suffocating in its silence. And then I realized something even worse. The silence wasn't a gift. It was a trap. The footsteps outside stopped, just outside the door. I held my breath, heart pounding in my chest. The knocking started again, but this time there was something more to it. A rhythm, a pattern. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. And in that moment, I understood. They weren't knocking to get in. They were knocking to tell me to stay in. I could feel it now, the presence, the weight of it, the pressure, invisible but all-encompassing, filled every inch of the room. Something was outside, watching, waiting for me to move, waiting for me to make the wrong choice. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how it had come. But one thing was painfully clear. Whatever it was, it had already begun its hunt, and I was its prey. The sound of the door handle turning sent my heart racing. I had moments, maybe less. I had to make a choice, and I had to do it fast. The world had become a place of ghosts. Cities once filled with life were now hollowed-out husks, abandoned by the living, while an unseen force thrived in the absence of human presence. All across the globe, people had locked themselves inside, too frightened to even dare peeking out the windows. The emergency message still echoed in the back of their minds, reverberating across every screen, every device: hide. It had been their first instinct, their first reaction, and it had been the wrong one. The days turned into weeks, and the hum, unrelenting, maddening, remained. It was as if it had become a part of the world itself. No matter where you went, it was there. In the empty streets, in the darkened rooms, in your thoughts. Some had tried to ignore it, hoping that if they pretended it wasn't there, it would go away. But they were wrong. I wasn't one of those people. I wasn't prepared to hide forever. I couldn't just wait in my apartment, covering my windows and cowering in silence. The hum was the soundtrack to my nightmares, but I had to know what was causing it. I had to understand why the world had come to a standstill. I was driven by something deep inside me, a need for answers that couldn't be shaken. The walls of my apartment began to close in on me. It had been weeks since I last left. The messages had stopped flashing on my phone, but the fear, the uncertainty, the suffocating sense of being hunted, it never stopped. And then one day, there was a break. The phone buzzed in my hand, a lone notification amidst the silence. Underground research facility, 150 miles south of you, reporting urgent findings. Read now. I couldn't ignore it. I didn't even have to think about it. My fingers flew over the screen as I opened the message. The message was short, but the implications were enormous. We have found something beneath the surface. Something ancient, the hum. It's not a glitch, it's not a signal from space, it's something else. We don't know what, but it's here. And it's waking up. The facility was in a remote location, hidden far beneath the earth in an underground bunker designed to withstand the most extreme threats. But it was more than just a shelter. It was a place where humanity's deepest secrets were held. A place that had been built to uncover the mysteries of the universe, to explore the very nature of life itself. But in their quest for answers, they had uncovered something far darker than they had ever anticipated. And in doing so, they had made a grave mistake. The message ended with an urgent warning. We need help. Come if you can, but be prepared. We can't stop what's coming. It's already here. For the first time in days, a spark of hope flickered in my chest. The survivors at the bunker had found something. They knew something, and I needed to get there. But the road wasn't easy. The journey to the facility was treacherous. Long stretches of highway littered with abandoned cars, roads blocked by crumbled structures, and patches of wilderness that seemed to warp and distort as I drove through them. There was no telling what I might encounter out there. The world had changed, and it wasn't just the silence. It was the sense that something was always watching, always waiting. I drove in the dead of night, the hum still a constant presence in my ears. Every mile I put between myself and the safety of my apartment felt like a gamble. I wasn't sure what I was heading toward, but it didn't matter. I had to keep moving. When I finally arrived, the facility looked just as the message had described. Isolated, hidden from view, and eerily silent. There were no lights, no signs of life. The doors to the underground bunker were sealed shut, but I wasn't here to play it safe anymore. I had to know. I forced my way inside, breaking through the security systems with a combination of brute force and luck. The underground bunker was dark, the air thick with dust and the weight of years of isolation. I moved cautiously through the empty halls, my footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. It felt like I was trespassing in a place that had been abandoned long ago, but the blinking red lights in the hallway told me that the power was still on. Something was still active here. As I moved deeper into the facility, I found evidence of the survivors, abandoned equipment, half-finished meals, and hastily scrawled notes on the walls. The last message I found was written in black marker on a steel door. They're here. They can't be seen. They don't need to be. The words sent a chill down my spine. I knew what they meant. The hiders. The very thing the survivors had discovered in their research. They had been right all along. The hiders didn't need to be seen. They didn't need to show themselves. They thrived in the darkness, in the silence, and they had been waiting for humanity to make the mistake of thinking they were safe. I stumbled into the central chamber, the heart of the facility, where the research had been conducted. The walls were lined with monitors, most of them now blank or corrupted by static. But there, in the center of the room, was something that made my blood run cold. A massive containment unit stood in the center, its glass walls cracked and its interior illuminated by a faint, pulsing glow. Inside, suspended in the dark, was something that looked almost human. No, not human. It was something ancient, something that had been buried beneath the earth for longer than any of us had existed. I didn't need to touch it to feel its presence. I didn't need to look closely to know that it was alive. It was waiting. It had been waiting for centuries, millennia, perhaps even longer. And now, the hum, the signal, the awakening, it was all coming to a head. In the corner of the room, I saw the remnants of the survivors. There was no hope in their eyes, no fight left in them. They had seen it, the truth behind the message, and they had realized too late that there was no escape. But there was something else in the room, something that was far more terrifying than the creature in the containment unit. It was the realization that the hiders were never after just a few people. No, they were after all of us. The signal wasn't for a small group of survivors. It was a call to awaken something far older, far more powerful than we could ever understand. The survivors had made their final mistake. They had uncovered the truth, and in doing so, they had sealed their fate. And now the world would pay the price. I didn't need to see them to know they were coming. The darkness around me shifted. The walls seemed to close in, and the hum grew louder, a chorus of voices rising from every corner, every crack, every crevice. There was no hiding now. The hiders had found us, and there would be no escape. The world is no more. The cities that once hummed with life have been consumed by a silence so profound that it feels as if the earth itself has exhaled its last breath. The streets are empty, save for abandoned cars and crumbling buildings, all standing as mute monuments to the life that once thrived here. The air, once filled with the noise of human existence, now hangs heavy, still and lifeless. There is no wind, no birds, no animals, only the echoes of a time long gone. The hum that once rattled the minds of every living person has ceased, leaving behind a silence so absolute, it's as though even the memory of it has begun to fade. The devices that once broadcasted the emergency alerts, those haunting words, hide, now lie dormant, their screens blank, their once powerful networks reduced to mere relics of an era people believed they could survive. But survival had been a delusion. The remnants of humanity are scattered, their fates uncertain. Some may have fled, some may have hidden, but whatever choice they made, it no longer matters. The world has moved on without them. The hiders, unseen, unknowable, have long since claimed what they came for. The few who had dared to uncover the truth, who had ventured into the depths of the research facility, met the same fate as the rest. Their last moments, filled with horror and the realization of the unimaginable, will never be known. In the empty, decaying chambers of the underground bunker, no one remains to tell the tale of what truly transpired. The researchers, the survivors, the frightened souls who had reached out for help, they are gone. Only their desperate messages and the faint traces of their lives remain, scattered across walls, monitors, and abandoned equipment. The creatures, the hiders, remain shrouded in mystery. No one knows their origin, their purpose, or how long they had been waiting. Had they always been here, lurking beneath the surface of the earth, waiting for humanity to stumble upon them? Or had they come from somewhere far beyond our comprehension, drawn by some ancient, incomprehensible need? The answers are lost to the silence. But in the deepest corners of the earth, far from the empty cities and silent streets, the hiders wait. They wait for something. Perhaps for the world to reclaim its place in the cosmos, perhaps for a new generation to rise up and unknowingly call to them. Their presence is a constant, an unyielding fact of the universe that no human hand can erase. The world may forget, but the hiders never will. And though the hum is gone, something even more terrifying remains. The knowledge that some things cannot be hidden. Not from the earth, not from the void, not from whatever it is that watches, waits, and calls from the darkness. The world is no more. But the hiders are still here, always, forever. If you've made it this far, you're one of the few who dared to uncover the truth. But remember, sometimes ignorance is the only protection we have against things we can't fully understand. If you enjoyed this terrifying journey, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with those who need to know what's lurking just beneath the surface before it's too late. And as always, stay vigilant. Because you never know when the next emergency alert will sound, or who or what might be waiting for you. Until next time, hide.